So I think we are almost 10 minutes after 8. Maybe we can start. What do you think? And we can still have people joining after that.
Yeah.
So I would like to welcome Josepha and Tammie that are coming from a bit far away from the Balkan Peninsula. I mean, Tammie is in the UK, Josepha is in the US. We did wake up Josepha a bit early. Tammie is just 2 hours behind, so it's a little bit better. We're very happy that you're here today because it's the first time we have discussed to do something like that, a women-only meetup. And we're still under discussions if we're doing the right thing, if we should do something different, how we can support diversity and women inclusion in the WordPress community, if we should have male attendees at the meetups, because basically our friends in the communities are very supportive in all the meetups that are joining tonight. I mean, we are here from the Albanian, Greek community, Bulgarian, Serbian, Romanian, and the Turkish also. So several countries, some of the meetups have only male organizers, but when we communicated the idea of a women-only meetup, they were all so supportive and very, very happy to be a part of this. And it was an idea and a discussion we had last night with Milana about if we're doing the right thing, telling them that they cannot attend, uh, being so supportive of this. However, since this is the first time and we asked for the girls' help from abroad, we're very happy to have them here. And we saw an initiative like the WordPress release by women and non-binary people that was very interesting, and we definitely want to know more about it. How did the idea occur? How you put things together? How you organized this? How was this experience for you? Josepha, would you like to start?
Yeah, I can. So in case you do not know me, my name is Josepha, and the idea for an all women and non-binary release was I had it years ago, but was kind of scared to do it, for lack of a better word. It's so hard to bring a group of people that are traditionally unheard in whatever community you're part of together to do something that's so public and so forward facing. And I was really worried that WordPress wasn't ready for it and that I was going to put all of the people in that release in kind of a risky position, just making them really visible so that everybody could be mean or whatever I worried was going to happen. And it was, I can't remember, late 2018, late 2019, whenever it was, I just tweeted as a response to someone, I want to say it was Francesca, that like, this was a stretch goal of mine, having that type of release, but that I didn't actually think that anyone was going to come with me on it. And then they did. And I was terrified because I was like, what am I going to do with all of these women and non-binary folks that I felt like I was making a promise to. And so, yeah, it had been years of work to kind of make sure that teams were ready and teams were focusing on creating any level of psychological safety and documenting things and making it clear how we get onboarded and how people can kind of learn how to participate in WordPress wherever it is that they're participating from. And then at the top of 2020, I was like, why not? We rushed forward, and it was really exciting, I think. Well, yeah, that's the high level story of how it came to be.
It is a nice thing to see women coming forward and raise up their voice and showing off their work. It's not exactly a show off, but it's proving that we can do it. And the first thing we need to prove is not to everyone else, but to us. because we don't have so much faith in ourselves. Because girls can do it, but they're not quite sure they can say it out
And
loud.
I and Tammie, you may have a different opinion on this, but I hate the idea that we have to prove things to people, right? Because like some of our most expert subject matter experts on things that we have to do in the WordPress project come from the women who are using the software, right? And women make decisions on behalf of their entire households and on behalf of entire teams and entire communities across the entire world. And so like, who are we to pretend that women have to prove anything to anyone, let alone themselves? But I also understand that it's really real. Like I consistently struggle with imposter syndrome, and like I am at the top of my field in a really clear way, you know? And so like I hate that that's a thing that we have to struggle with, but I also understand that like proving, as in having someone say to you, no, I really do think that you're good at this, is just as valuable as like proving to yourself that you can.
Oh, plus so many ones. It's horrible that you have to prove, right? And I mean, if I had a penny for every time I say the word sorry, and I say that because culturally and because of I mean, I'm mid-40s and I'm a woman, and there's a weight to that, right? Like I've grown up in a certain culture and a certain age, so I'm almost apologizing for existing, and that's not okay, right? And I can only deprogram myself a certain amount on that, and I can hope that each generation is deprogrammed more. That's my biggest hope. With a lot of the work we're doing, it sounds like a small hope, but it's huge. That really we do that. That I hope that the next people don't have to do that. It's big. But the biggest thing is to yourself, and knowing that not that you can do it, but knowing that you had it. And I think part of that, there's a gift of mentorship that this release also gave people. And I think there's something for me particularly, this is very personal, but something that maybe in the latter part of my contribution journey, I've realized my worth. I should have never had to realize my worth, but I have realized through mentorship. And that's actually really powerful. Sometimes you can't realize your worth yourself, but when you're teaching someone, you can realize it as well. And I saw quite a lot of that. When someone was teaching someone something, they were like, hang on, I know this. Like, I know this well enough to teach someone this. And that's amazing when someone can do that. But no, I don't like it. Nobody should have to prove. I don't see non-women having to, or non-binary having to prove themselves, or feeling they have to do that much. I think sometimes, depending on the person, they can, but yeah, there's so many.
Yeah. I think the thing, oh, sorry, there's another question coming.
Do we have any question? Because we didn't see any raised hand.
No, I just saw you unmuting, and I thought to myself, she's got a question. I'll wait.
I always have questions, but sometimes I may leave people speak first before I start asking, because I don't. I'm a fan of interacting, to tell the truth, but I try to, I don't know, make this smaller with the years passing. So you believe in mentorship mainly, that the whole release was a mentoring procedure, helping other women to participate, get involved, contribute, maybe evolve their skills and knowledge. Did you have many newcomers, new girls joining that release? Or was it old, when I say old, I don't mean the age, but people that, yeah, veterans contributors?
Yeah, I first want to mention for myself that I I don't believe that the solution for representation anywhere is like the job of upper leadership or the job of middle leadership, or like, I don't think that belongs to one group. I think that that belongs to everyone that is there. And so the mentorship was absolutely really valuable. It was really important. It was an opportunity for WordPressers, wherever they were, to like show their commitment to leading forward into something better than we see across a lot of technological spaces. But at the same time, like, if you have just your community wanting those things and you don't have buy-in from your leadership, or you have a bunch of people who don't want to move forward into this idea that women exist and matter, or that non-binary folks exist and matter, and are sabotaging it the whole time, like it's a collective effort. And so the mentorship absolutely was key, but didn't function on its own, I think. But we had at the start like 75 women and non-binary folks who raised their hand to participate, and I think probably like a quarter of them were people who had already contributed to WordPress in some way, and then probably I want to say maybe 10% who had contributed to some open source in some way prior to that, and then mostly people who were doing this for the first time, which is why a lot of the mentorship, and Tammie, maybe you and I both were on some extended leave at this time, but during the 5.5 release is when most of that mentorship happened with those folks who were coming on for the 5.6 release. And then we got back for 5.6 and we were like, everyone buckle up because it goes really fast and there's a lot. But yeah.
Yeah, we both were. I actually found that gave a great perspective, because I kind of came back and there's 2 points I wanted to just know on the mentorship. I think it's really important to say that women shouldn't be the only mentors. Because that's incredibly, it's actually a really good role that women, non-women and non-binary people can do. So men can basically step into that role. And also that I learned a great lesson by taking an extended leave, by making space as a veteran. I'm going to call myself old. I'm mid-40s, but no, yeah, veteran's a better word. It creates a space. Sometimes we don't realize the space we take up. And there's different levels of privilege, even if you are an underrepresented person. There's different levels of privilege in that, and you have to recognize what level of privilege you have within that. And I personally have a lot of privilege. I was a donated contributor. I have a lot of other privileges. And by taking myself out of that space through extended leave, it left a gap that was just right for people to go into. And that was amazing. And that is something that's going to reap rewards going forward. And I think that's really, really important for us all to remember. Not that I'm saying that you have to step away from something you're passionate about, because you can continue to do amazing things, but we should always realize where we can form gaps in the work for others to come up, because people did that for me, and that's how I do what I'm doing as well.
And there's just nothing harder in the world when you are really passionate about something than like committing to the fact that maybe being the only one that can do it is a problem for you and the thing you're passionate about. Like, that's so hard. I never want to let go of anything because I just so desperately want it to succeed. And I always think to myself, like, if I'm not doing it, who's going to? But that's also a really important question to ask myself, as just like a general concept of sustainability for the people around us and the community that I'm serving. Like, if I'm not going to do it, who does it? And also, what if I were not able to do it? And if I haven't found a way to pull out a chair for people who might be able to do this in the future, like, I've done a disservice to WordPress or whatever community it is that I'm serving in that moment. But it's so hard.
Yeah,
I get it.
It's also really hard because not force is a strong word, but we've, there's adversity coming up. It's not been an easy journey for many people to get where you have. So when you finally get there, it's just like, oh, and maybe you don't want to continue on, and you see the mountain and it's a bit further, but it's really, really important to make space, and that's how the next generations and the next generations can step into work. And I think it's important when we say age, it's different. The age of contribution is different from the physical age, because you can be really new at contributing as well.
Yeah. I think you have mentioned privilege a couple times in this answer, and I think that one of the things that we lose sight of in, like, when you're in the middle of open source contribution, is that being able to actively contribute in that way is absolutely a privilege. And with that kind of privilege also comes a lot of responsibility, like the responsibility for anyone who is either creating the environment to contribute in, or who is actively contributing to the environment, to the software, to the design, to whatever it is. The responsibility to make good decisions on behalf of 40% of the web, or 200,000 attendees to your community every year, or 2,000 contributors who show up every single week. Like, the responsibility of that is really, it's hard to see when you're trying to figure out how to get there. And so, like, the relationship between privilege to do the thing and also responsibility while doing that is so valuable. And I think that the mentorship that was provided in both 5.5 and 5.6 helped people to, like, do the highly privileged, like, I have extra time to do this kind of work, without necessarily having to also confront the fact of, like, and making decisions for 40% of the web, which can really scare you and stop you in your tracks if you think about it too hard. Just saying.
So how much time did the whole release take? And how easy was to communicate all this thing only online, without having the opportunity for a gathering during a WordCamp, for example? If we had a WordCamp US or a WordCamp Europe, you could work during the contributor day for that, and have the opportunity of being someplace around the table and work all together.
Yeah. So the actual timeline, I want to say, was 5 or 6 months. The timeline for the release itself, which is about as long as our releases take, 5 or 6 months. But, like, actual time spent was quite a bit. So for the release lead, this work is probably 20 hours a week at the minimum for the majority of that time. And that's true for every release. Like, the person who is managing the release and making sure that it's moving forward and staying with timelines and, like, pulling features in and out as required, like, that takes a lot of time for the entire process, really. And then I feel like the release process is set up so you can contribute as much time as you have available. And in its way, we do kind of have a small group of people who just have to work 40 hours a week on nothing but getting people's patches reviewed and merged, which is a thing that we should figure out in the long term, but also, sets us up for being able to accept a huge volume of contributions, even if we can't accept a huge volume of commits from those contributions as well.
Yeah,
I
think.
One, yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, I had just one question about this one was a female and non-binary release. Usually, how many women and non-binary people participate to the previous releases that were not so, I will quote, exclusive? No, not exclusive,
Yeah. I haven't actually looked at that information. So this was specifically about the release team, and we've only had like teams in this format where they're like 9 people for a couple years, I want to say. And I think in those release teams that we've had over that time, there's always been at least one woman or non-binary person in it. But I also think a lot of times it was me. And I'm not sure that I count if I'm the only woman that shows up in that release team over and over and over again. But that can't possibly be right, Tammie. There would have to be like 3 or 4, right?
I think it was a very small collection.
Yeah.
It may have been 2 or 3.
And it was the same ones.
Yes, which doesn't mean it counts.
Right.
I think if it's more than twice the same people, it probably doesn't count. And I think an additional, I'm going to go for the extra hard level. It doesn't count if they're only people that are almost full-time contributors, because I think that was also something that needs commenting on about this release, which I thought was really special. It brought in people who were not just paid to contribute, which I think is kind of a valuable role and amazing that people get to do that, but it's often not accessible to everybody, and not accessible to non-developers as well, to be honest. So because this release actually had a really wide range of roles, which was very exciting. And because of it had the cohorts, so it had specific cohorts designed around like design, or documentation and different specific areas. These are areas that wouldn't necessarily have these roles. So you had a variety of different people who were able to focus on that. And because it had a cohort, the work was split between those people. On design, we almost had 24/7 coverage. The person who was co-leading with me, it was amazing. They were in New Zealand, I was here, so we literally had 24/7 coverage. And it was, you mentioned meetups. I actually don't think some of these people would necessarily be able to go to a meetup, or
I think that's true.
It's a huge thing to go to a meetup. The money to cost, the paying to go there, or even the distance. So actually being able to sync and communicate, and we have like the channels and communication on Slack, I think was really, really important. And because we were kind of in the habit of online communicating, doing it this way, I think it kind of helped that way.
Yeah, I do think that really gave people a leg up, because I know that, like, as far as cultural differences go, the work of communicating when you're all distributed or leading when you're all distributed is so vastly different from when you're all in an office together. And in the past, when we've had almost 100% of the time full-time sponsored people who were familiar with that process of communicating, even though you're not nearby, it did, whether it was good or not, end up like with the people who are not used to that process kind of getting left out, because it's just so hard to follow when you first start doing it. And so since we had 6 months of everybody learning how to work as distributed workforces, whether we wanted to or not, that really, I think, helped with our communication overall. Not that we were perfect, in case anyone misunderstands that. We had a lot that we could do better, but I still was very proud of the release. So.
And I think norms were, like, ways of communicating were established within each cohort and within the main, which I think was really good. Focusing on noise to information ratio, which became very important as the year went on for everybody. But the only thing I think was almost missing is like the end release where everyone gets to celebrate. But I honestly don't think everybody would have been able to make WordCamp US. So I think it was a great leveler having nobody make that event and everybody be able to celebrate it online almost in that sense. Yeah.
You know, that is one thing that I feel like at the end we had not made a big enough deal about this release. And I realized that I was just like laser focused on getting the release out, and also WordPress as a whole is like, we don't talk about how great we are. Like, our contributors feel that way, and as a result, our most of the time. Community feels that way. And so everyone's like, we did a great job, we said to ourselves over here, patting ourselves on the back. And I can't say I regret how that worked out, because I also know that I think it would have made many people in that release team feel a little bit called out, like a little bit too much attention, and maybe a little bit too much like WordPress patting itself on its back for their hard work. And so I don't regret how it happened, but I do wish that I had made a stronger effort to get people to understand how incredibly monumental this was, how incredibly different it is for us as WordPress, the largest CMS that you got out there, to say, like, we are committed to helping bring in these voices by giving them a way to be trained, by giving them a way to learn more and be more comfortable in what they do and don't know, and to help them to identify that really complicated network of people who can help them to be heard in the space. I wish we had done that a bit better, but that's neither here nor there. I guess there's no time like today to get it done. So
The truth is that we usually expect a bigger shout out for such initiatives, as it's not common in workplaces around the world, probably in our countries also, um, and not only workplaces but communities too. To tell the truth, since I started being a part of WordPress Greek community, I have not even once in my times here among my folks since 2016 that I felt mansplained or being left behind or anything like that. And the first years, I'm not proud to say that, but I was the only woman in the organizing team. But I am proud to say that this year I have a lot of girls with me organizing Work in Greece, and also meetups around the country. And this was yeah, and this was the reason that this meetup today was a personal, I wouldn't say, uh, I don't know, step forward, but a wish to see women from all the Balkan countries gathering. I have met most of the girls from Balkans I know work in Europe, and that point was one of the most amazing times of my life in Belgrade. For all these years I am with the community. I met Milana, not only Milana, but Milica also, and many good friends that I have at the moment. And I have met inspiring people, inspiring women that made me want to get a step further. I was always afraid of being in front of other people. And when I told my team in Greece that I wasn't very happy to do that, they made me present one track in WordCamp Athens. So it was a way to push me. And I want to push the girls forward to raise their voice, be able to say, I can do this, I can talk, I can share my experience. It's not necessary to be the best of the best, but you have experienced something within the community or with WordPress or during your work time. You have learned to do something. I might not know that. I would like to you to share it with me so I can do it too, if I cannot find any other way to learn. Or if I want a mentor, because mentoring someone, you learn also. And the one who mentors you also learns, gets something from you. I suppose this release really had to be shouted out, and all the efforts the community does for diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, I mean, I think it should have been more than it was. For what it's worth, it wasn't necessarily for lack of trying. Like, I did try to get the word out that this was different and why we were doing it versus why we were not doing it, and a number of other things, without success. And then also didn't follow up. Like, you know, there's that. I don't know. I think there's something to be said for pushing people out past their limits. I think there's something to be said for that. But I also found, at least in this release, that or maybe it's not a thing I found. Maybe it's just a thing I worried about, and it would have been fine regardless. I worried consistently through this release process that if I pushed all of these team members to do something that they were not familiar with or comfortable with, I would actually just be scaring them away from our overall plan here, which was to have more non-traditional technology voices in our space, and trained and empowered to do something. And maybe that was just me being worried. Like, maybe what would have happened is that everyone was fine, and a little bit of fear is good for them, but I didn't feel comfortable doing that.
I think you have to be careful because not everybody likes to be like super upfront as well. So I think it's a good fear to be aware of. I'm not going to try and use a word. I think it's a balance, right? You have to be forceful enough, and shout about it enough. But some people, it's a delicate place. Some people can't be front, don't want to be front in that space, but they still want to work in that space. Some people just aren't that way. They just want to kind of join in and do the work. So I personally think there was a nice balance met. I'm one of those people that I will get very like, look at my shoes a lot. If someone pushes me forward too much, I do a lot of root gazing, a lot of it. But I really just like to get in and do stuff. And I think that we have to remember that whilst we're doing this, that all women and people in non-binary are different types. It's not one type we're dealing with, one personality we're dealing with. We're dealing with so many different people and so many different types of people, as whilst we're trying to deal with this inclusion problem. And it's not one solution fits all as a result of that. So what one method works, this isn't going to work for another person. So yeah, it's a fine balance, I think. There's also cultural comes into this, which is we're a global project. So it's super cultural. What maybe would have worked in one country isn't going to work in another country. So you're trying to find a middle ground culturally through this. It's a complicated process. I personally think it's not even a good first pancake. It's a really good way to do it, right? It's great. And I think that it sets some good groundwork to build on. And you're already seeing that in the releases. And I think that that's really important aspect of this work. It's not just the release and it stops there and we're done, checkbox. It's set that groundwork, and it's going to happen again. And its momentum has been happened now. Yeah.
Must feel really exciting to be a part of this. I won't say I'm jealous, but I will say I'm proud of you both and the whole team. And I was even more happy to see names of ladies I have met at least once. It's very inspiring to see people, setting an example.
Yeah.
I think this is very important for women in our sector, and maybe in particular in our countries here. Although you can see many hardworking girls, many smart girls, girls with knowledge and skills and all these things, you won't easily see a girl stepping up. So when you see a girl stepping up, this is setting an example for the rest of the girls to come forward and raising their voices.
I say this thing, I say this thing. It's a very nice quotable sentence. But I really believe that when we, in our case, as women, as non-binary, as people of color, as whatever makes you who you are, when we find that we are in a situation where we have low authority, where our privilege is low, we owe it to that group to speak up. And honestly, owe it to that group is not really right. We owe it to ourselves because we are knowledgeable in who we are with our own experiences. But when we find, and this is rare for many of us, but when we find that we are in a situation where we have high power and high privilege, we owe it to that community to listen up when we're doing things. And that is one of the hardest parts of like figuring out where your place at the table is, especially as you're looking at like, okay, so I'm here and I have a voice and I am an expert in the things, but I don't necessarily feel like I can show up to lead. I don't necessarily feel like I have the knowledge or the information or the power or whatever it is. It's so hard as you're navigating that space to think to yourself, okay, well, no one here looks like me or has my experience, and so I should say something because otherwise they're going to miss that forever. The most terrifying thing that you can ever do is come to that space for yourself.
I think it's really important to realize as well the importance of it, not just in the context of WordPress. As someone that's been involved in technology for quite a long time, particularly open source, and I started out in Linux, this isn't normal to have. I mean, whilst it should be, it shouldn't be that it's not normal. I don't want that this isn't normal, but it isn't. So I think that it was weird that hasn't maybe got recognized so much, but it hasn't. So maybe we need to do it a few more times. I don't know. But really, that's something very important to recognize as a project, that we did that. And going forward, the growth that we have of people in that space, it's something that will lead to other people being able to see a home for their contributions here that maybe they haven't got in other projects. Open source can be woolly, to use a phrase, and prickly, and not always sunshines and rainbows for everybody. And to think that people could have that space, and not just have that space, but have that space, and it was safe. And I think that that's really, really important. And Josepha, you mentioned that as a concern at the beginning. It was really safe for everybody involved. And I think that was a slight surprise to me because, you know, not thinking the worst of human nature, but social media, social media is not the best. And like I avoid Twitter for reasons. And the fact that it was safe, I think is a credit to this community. And I did see some like advocacy going on around that, and some like bolstering and supporting, to mean that there was no room for it not to be safe. And I think that that's really, really important.
Yeah. And I suppose that like my biggest worry, one, was that around that question of like, is it going to be safe? On the one hand, I feel like if I brought folks in and it was not safe to work in, not a safe environment to work in, like I should have known better, I felt. And so like I felt a lot of personal risk around like, what if I didn't do enough as I was starting to try to make these changes systemically in the project. But also I remembered back to my first core meeting that I led leading up to 5.0, which was the first time that I showed up in core. Like I had been watching meetings and advising from the back, from behind the scenes, and doing regular like admin work. But then the first meeting where I showed up and I was like, hello, I'm here to run the most consequential release since 2008. Like, my first meeting was terrifying. There were a bunch of questions that people had and I didn't necessarily have answers to. And I felt like it was this barrage of like, well, why don't you know? And on the one hand, saying I do not know is a fine answer as long as you find the answer, right? And I remember that in that meeting, I said, there are a million of you and one of me. And right now, this is terrifying. So please stop it. Like, I had to say that in the middle of the meeting. And thinking back to that moment, I was like, I can't stop people from being mean, right? But I should, having had lived that experience, be able to say, I should be able to say, when there are questions, people will ask them in a way that is filled with curiosity as opposed to filled with accusation. And I just wasn't sure whether my ability to commit to that on behalf of all of WordPress was there. And so, yeah, so much fear of getting that release together, just filled with risks in my mind. But it was
think
worth it.
It shows how the environment of core has changed. Years ago, I ran away from core and hid in different spots. This is a long time ago because I was just like, oh, core, scary, because it was just shouty, and I don't like shouty. And I couldn't find my home, and that's changed. And I think that that's a credit to not just the release, it's all the work. The release is like the iceberg, right? Like, it's all the work that's gone on for such a long time, and it's continuing. It's the way the jokes that are told in the core chat, you know, the humor, the fact that there's an agenda, the fact that there's a structure that people can follow, the fact that there's notes, the fact there's regular times and everything's done. All these things add up to it being more inclusive, and have filled it out to different teams. So all that is all added up to the tone of the project. So I think it sounds like, hey, just doing a release. It's not that. It's such a long process.
Yeah, you're right. It was like 2 or 3 years worth of work with all of the teams that we have in the WordPress project to get to the point where like we could try this release. And it was folks over on design, bringing, like, I think that design was the first team that was like, we're going to take that code of conduct that exists for WordCamps and just like make it ours also. So design leading the way on things like that. Core, going back to this concept of like putting together agendas and making it clear what we're doing and what we're not doing. And we had a bunch of teams for years making small changes about the way they do the work so that it was easier to figure out where you belonged, how to do something once you figured out you belong there, and what to where to go when you had questions. Like, it was 2 or 3 years of really weird requests, probably, if you didn't know what we were working on, from me. Please announce who's in the meeting when you start your meetings, folks. Like, why would anyone think that that matters? And a lot of trust and faith from all of these teams who were like, well, I don't know why Core's doing that, but I guess we'll do it too now. So that we could just be like, we're going to have a bunch of people you don't normally see working in software, working on this really important release. Like, yeah, it's a lot of stuff.
Same with the props channel, the props channel, the channel that everyone just stumbles in, like, even when their name's mentioned, or they stumble and go, well, this is a good place. There's a props channel in Slack, which is basically a place where anyone that does awesome stuff, not just developers. In fact, I love the fact that it's actually less developers quite often. Is raised up, and I think that that's really, really important. So if someone does something ace in the project, you can say like their name, and it's the best way to shine a light on them. And it's one of my favorite places as well because of that, because you get to see the awesome things someone did.
If you had just an advice to give to a woman that starts contributing now and might feel overwhelmed like Josepha felt when people were asking her questions and she didn't have the answer, what would this advice be after this experience?
Tammie, do you want to start us off?
I like Tammie looking up, and yeah, the ceiling looks nice.
That's her thinking space.
Yeah, that's my thinking space is the top of my head. I would always encourage everyone to take things at their own pace and not be pressured to not take things at their own pace. We all have a different path that we function in, and I think you should be able to do that in contribution, and you should be able to follow that. And I don't mean like the skills you want to do, I mean like the pace you want to take things as well, and how you want to consume things, and how you want to participate, and what types of communication work for you. So just like take things at your own pace and consume in an effective way for you.
Yeah. I think that the advice that I would give, without any qualifications whatsoever, just like blanket true for everyone, no matter who you are, is that when you're getting started, if you feel overwhelmed, you should look for a buddy. You should look for a partner in the work, and it can be someone who knows everything already and can mentor you specifically, or it can literally just be somebody that you trust, that you can go to and just be like, Tammie, all of that's a mess, right? Am I crazy? Is it a mess? And Tammie can tell you whether it's a mess or not. Like it's as always, I hate that part of making things work in the world sometimes is finding a safe place to check and make sure that you're not imagining something, but that is just true. I don't even think that's just specific to women or non-binary folks. I think that everybody could use some confirmation of the fact that they're in the right place, that they're trying to do the right things, and that they are not alone in that moment. Like, I am considered a WordPress veteran. I've been here doing this for like 6 years, but I joined the community in 2009, 2010, and it was really hard when I did that. And, sometimes when I take a week-long vacation, it's also hard getting back together after just a week away. Like, it's going at lightning speed at all times with 2,000 people showing up every single week to do something. Like, with 2,000 people showing up, always something will have changed when you look back at something later. And so finding a person that can just hear you and be there for you is incredibly important.
Since we have been talking for safe places, and basically this was a reason this meetup was created to give women a safe place. When you first started, what was the first safe place you had within the community? It's not necessarily, a location or something, but it can be a person or a moment or an experience you had that made you feel that, yes, this is a safe place for me.
Tammie, what was your first
I'll
safe
go.
space?
I didn't look
Me?
up. Oh, sorry.
Okay, I can do it.
You go first.
Okay. My first safe space was actually with the community team. That's how I came up through the WordPress project. My development skills are not in a state where anyone would pay me money to do anything, but my organizational skills and my event planning skills are definitely in a place where people would pay me to do things. And so it was very, I wouldn't say it was easy to experiment, but it was not terrifying to fail when you did experiment. And so that was my first really safe space in WordPress. Someday I'm going to tell everybody my experience of my first trying to get the community together in Kansas City story, because it's hilarious. And also, were I a different person, I would have given up immediately. But when I found the WordPress community group, that's really when I felt like I had a safe space here.
My first was actually not WordPress, it was BuddyPress. So mainly because I found WordPress super scary and shouty. So it was a long time ago, though, and I feel very veteran at this point. I was still contributing to core. It wasn't like I wasn't contributing, but I just found that in BuddyPress, I was given space to do things at my pace and be me. It was slightly smaller, which I functioned better, or at least back then I hadn't learned how to function as well in bigger groups. You can fake bigger groups a little bit, and couldn't have learned that lesson quite yet for myself. I learned that over the years, but really that, and then I slowly learned to be able to come back in that sense, and then kind of the past came back and via theme. But really for me, it was BuddyPress, and it was just a space I could be me. From a community outside, it was I went to my first meetup within and then speaking. If my first speaking thing had been my first entry point, I wouldn't have done it, and it was horrible. So I would also say your first start doesn't have to be your tone to the rest of the thing. Same as with core. My first entry points to this WordPress specifically weren't always smooth going for me, but it was finding my spot. And I think that's a big kind of lesson, is you will find your spot. There's so many different areas you can go in, and there's adjacent areas, as I'm kind of proof. I kind of found my way back, but I guess I'm always going to have a soft spot for BuddyPress as a result.
I'll always have a soft spot for community. That's just how that works.
Yeah, it's the place, kind of the place you found your first cushion to sit on, right?
Yeah. That's my cushion if I ever really need to go back to it.
Yeah. It's very important. It's really important to kind of find that for everybody, and you see that with people. They're wandering around, and you often see that with contributors. They wander around trying to find their spot, and then they find it, and you just can see they belong, and then they flourish.
Absolutely.
In fact, this question is a question I would like to ask almost everyone in the community. I think it's the most interesting one. When you get to know someone, when it was the first time you felt this as your community. Another thing I would like to ask, now that we are talking about the release, do you think we will have in the future again a release of that kind? I mean, do you think there will be something like a schedule that we're going to have the releases the way they used to be, but we're going to have an edition just for women and non-binary people? Because it was a nice effort, we want to do it again.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that kind of release will never happen again. I won't say that because anytime that you are working against an ingrained system, you have to continue to maintain it. Just like, I don't want to work out. And so I have to every single day make myself do things I hate to do because it's good for me and my heart, and so I'm not going to say that we'll never do it again. But I always want to be sure, because it is a lot of work and it's a big ask for the folks who are showing up. I always want to make sure that when we are pulling together something like that, it is for the right reasons. It's not just a look, we have women kind of thing. I have binders of women for anyone who is a political joker. But yeah, I want to always be sure that what we're trying to do is set up a long-term sustainable concept of training these unheard voices, these underrepresented people, to be able to show up. And so I would never just commit to it on an annual basis in hopes we could get everyone together around it. I think that it matters what we are going to work on and the people who are available to help us get it done. because otherwise it's just like a show thing. Maybe I worry that it would be a show thing. Yeah.
And there's a danger it gets into like kind of show, and then particularly if we go into like tokenism, right? There's a danger that it gets into, or if we get into like quotas of each release has to have X percentage of this or whatever. And it really is about just ensuring that there's the right diverse people that will fill the roles, and that's not a magic wand. And that's a long term, and it's not just women and non-binary. It's a global project, and it's surprisingly unglobal. If you look at the kind of releases, that's a huge thing to change, and I'm very excited to see that changing. The diversity, if we can stand up and say that it's a truly global release, that would also be incredibly, a truly gender global release would be incredible, right? That feels like an evolution to me. I have no say in anything, but that feels like a great evolution of this kind of going forward. And I think that builds on something like this, is ensuring that I think this still was like, it was good, but because of the people we had, it's still very biased to a certain geographical regions, because that's all we have currently. So kind of working on that going forward, and the people that we were able in different geographical, I think that's huge. So, yeah.
We do have a high bias toward the US and EU. And when I first showed up as a sponsored contributor, like I was banging the drum of like, we need to get the African nation into WordPress and also like all of Asia. And it's really hard because so many of the people who have all the information about how to do things are in the US and Europe. And so it's really hard because you've got all the folks who want to contribute outside of those areas, and they're like, but we don't have anyone who has the answers right now. So like, it's a little bit chicken and egg. But yeah, anyway, that's not what you asked, but it is a question I have.
I like the way new questions are raised when you have a discussion. That's the reason we have a discussion. Otherwise, it would be just a talk. You could just take a microphone for 30 minutes and blah, 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 blah. And I don't know, Milana, because I see her next to me, I could fall asleep in her chair, and I could do the same here. Yeah, some things might be very interesting, but sound boring when it's just one person, blah, 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 and no questions, no discussions, nothing like that. I think I have covered a certain amount of my questions, but I would like to see someone else asking things. So who's gonna go first and interrogate the girls? What, no one? Oh, come on, you must have a question. Okay, now you make me feel a little bit, I don't know, not smart. I won't say the other word, the S word. I will say not smart because I do the most questions.
Looks like we've got a question that came in the chat.
So Gordana, is it even possible to fit into a community when you start with WordPress in your 50s?
I will say a resounding yes.
Yeah, I'm going to say you're super young in your 50s. I like, yes, like this is the thing of like saying veteran. Veteran is like so important. We need all different ages and we need those different experience. You come with such wealth of experience, both in life and in the skills you have, that your voice is incredibly needed. I'm assuming this is you as well in saying that you asked that question, you're not asking that for someone else.
But if not,
So,
you tell your friend it's true too.
yes. So, I mean, I'm not young. Like I'm getting
You're not
later,
old either,
40s now.
Tammie.
Yeah, but you know, but I'm using it as a context, right? Like in the context of like, not everybody who contributes is like 20 or 30, and if it was, it wouldn't be a wide project. We should have people from like young through to like 80, 90, 100, and that's how you have from an age range perspective. So you should be in the middle at 50s.
In your 50s, you're right in the sweet spot.
Yeah.
My mom actually introduced me to WordPress, and she discovered WordPress in her 50s. She not only introduced me to WordPress, but also introduced me to the WordPress community as a whole. She's been in this for longer than I have. And yeah, like never a doubt in her mind that she absolutely could find a place to be productive in whatever way she wanted to. And so, yeah, 50s for sure. 50s all the way up until you're dead. You fit in WordPress. So.
For some reason, I had an answer that was an advertisement for clothing. It was like style is not a size, so age doesn't matter. It was something like that in my mind.
Age only matters if you're a cheese.
I think it's also really important for women who maybe have had to do different roles, and maybe who've had to bring up children or do different roles in their life, and find they have multiple career paths. So coming to contribution later is pretty common. So I think it's really important to show that. Another thing is, when you were at school, when you didn't get the option of technology. When I was at school, it was you're artistic or you're technology. You cannot be both. Thankfully, we've maybe moved past that a little bit, but as a result, particularly a lot of women were told, oh yeah, you're not technical. And that has meant that a lot of awesome technical women just weren't caught, and maybe are realizing in like their 50s, 60s, hey, I really like coding, or hey, I'm really amazing at this.
Yeah.
So.
I see a lot of daughters contributing to WordPress. I see one translates WordPress and the other one was volunteering at a WordCamp when she was 15. Girls, maybe it's time to have a daughter. I mean,
my daughter actually loved that experience. It was her 15th birthday on the speakers dinner, and I was organizing that WordCamp. It was local WordCamp in Niš, and so we are from Novi Sad, and we had to travel to Niš, and I asked other organizers to buy 2 cakes because it was one for my daughter, and the other organizer also had a birthday that day, and they didn't know about that. So it was speakers dinner and organizers and volunteers, and my daughter asked me, okay, so when will I get the cake? And I said, what cake? You have 70 people at your birthday. What else do you want? And then in like 10 minutes, we had live music, of course we do on Balkan, and music started playing the happy birthday song, and we took out the cakes, and she was so happy. And tomorrow she was like, you're making me do things. I don't want to be a volunteer. And I said, well, you can just go there and draw whatever. You don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
And she went upstairs. I was at the registration table. She went upstairs, and I thought she's doing something on her own. I went up, and she was full in t-shirt, doing things, giving stickers and everything, talking to people, and I was like, okay. And she loved it. She was full day volunteer, and she always asked me, when will she come again to volunteer?
Oh, that's sweet. I love it.
I suppose the next time it should be a WordCamp Europe. so she can volunteer and have enormous times of fun.
Yeah.
Oh, well, WordCamp Europe is a bit large. It's kind of, for me, and I'm loud extrovert, and it's too much for me of all the people and everything. I don't know. Maybe something smaller first, like Balkan Women.
Would be nice. That would be a nice idea.
Yeah.
So, ladies, do you have any other questions? Maybe not only for Tammie and Josepha, but maybe for women from another community. So, to see how things are done in other community. If you have any questions about that, you can ask Milana from Serbia. You can ask someone else from Bulgaria or Istanbul, etc. Do you want to say something else?
I wanted to bring up the topic you discussed with Milana at some point regarding the women-only meetings and groups, because this has been a matter that I have been chewing on for a long time, whether it's actually helpful or it's sabotaging, you know, the mixing of the groups of people, stuff like that. And well, the more I grow up, the more I tend to understand that there is some missing link that these women-only events actually play a role of. There is something that it feels like we need to build a bridge for some people out there, some women or not male people who don't feel as comfortable as we maybe to just go out and join groups and events. So this is my feeling. I think it's still, we're not at the point where we can just get rid of female only meetings and groups, but I wanted to hear your view as well. Anyone who would like to contribute.
Well, I have a strong opinion on that, but I understand that I am not able to understand most of women. So I was a classical musician, fully educated, worked as a classical musician for 10 years, and then I switched and I am now developer. And I'm for 10 years developer, and in any of those occupations, I never ever had a situation that I was disrespected or disregarded or not heard because I'm a woman. But I understand that I'm very loud and direct woman, and I've been told many times that, you know, it's hard to ignore me. And I know that's not the case with other women, but when I started being developer, I was the only woman most of the time. And I have to say, you know, if there is a little % of women doing this, and if we just limit ourselves to that little %, we cannot grow, because everything I know, I learned from men. Now, there are, you know, assholes and there are good men. And we have to make a difference between what is a good man and what we can give to each other. And being a developer, it's, you know, the situation is like that there are much more men than women. And if you limit yourself from interacting with them, you will not grow. And that is my, you know, I support supporting women. I want them to see, I was giving free workshops for developing teams in Serbia, in Novi Sad, and a lot of women applied. And you know, we can now speculate if it was because I'm female or not, whatever, maybe it is. But there were other men as well. And I think that if we show women that women can give workshop, can talk, can organize, I think these women who attend will feel safe enough to talk, even if we have men as audience. So my argument, strong argument, is that we should have male attendees, at least in the beginning, the ones we personally know, we know they support us, and where can they tell us how they respect us and support, and what is the thing they like about having women in community. I think it would be much more helpful than just shutting yourself and say this is only for women.
This is a conversation we had last night with Milana. It is a conversation we had previously when we started organizing the meeting, and also a discussion we had on Make WordPress Slack with the community deputies in order to decide how this is going to happen, how we can word it so it doesn't feel exclusive to men, that we just want to differentiate our existence from them within the WordPress community or something like that. And it is something I have been thinking since I first heard for a women-only meetup or a female meetup, or even a women meetup with male attendees. At first, because like Milana, we have not been used to a bad, I don't know, we hadn't any bad experience with men during our lives. I couldn't understand what it means to be bullied or disregarded, disrespected, and all these things. So when I first heard about a female meetup, I thought it was racist, not against men, but against women, because it's like telling women they don't belong in a whole, but they should be somewhere separately. And I had that discussion during WordCamp Europe in Belgrade with the creators of the female meetup in Berlin. And what was very nice in that meetup was that the organizers were a woman and a man, not just a woman. And I found it very important and supportive because they explained to me things women in their community had been through, but not within the community. They had been through in their workplace, their families, the way they grew up, etc. And they were scared to communicate, to be a part of the community, because they didn't know exactly what kind of people are these people in the WordPress community. Will Milana like me? Will Tammie bully me? Will a man assault me? Because I have been through this thing previously in another community, in my workplace, at the supermarket, on the road, walking, etc. So I don't know if WordPress community is a safe place for me. And basically the female meetups were meetups that were creating a little safe space before you move to the regular meetup. It was a way to meet Tammie and Josepha and Milica and Alexandra, and now I have 2-3 friends that I can go with to the regular meetup, because at that point we didn't have online meetups, it was all live ones. So I had someone that I would have as a company to be my safe place at the community. I would take Milana, grab a coffee, and go together to the meetup, and it felt safer for me. It looked like the foyer of a hotel. It's like you go in a hotel and the female meetup is the foyer and you meet people there, and then you move to the conference room of the hotel that's full of people, and it's not so scary anymore. I don't know. It left me that that essence. I had the same discussion that I had with Milana last night with the male organizers of my community a few days ago, because they're also supportive. And Takis in particular, that is a very dear friend of mine, told me the exact sentence that I am jealous, I won't be there, and I won't be able to participate, and it makes me sad, but I am really happy that you're taking this step further. And I really hope that it will work out for women to feel safer here and join and raise their voice, etc. So I feel men are understanding towards that, and it doesn't feel that inclusive. Not inclusive, exclusive. I wanted to say, I always mix these two words. However, I don't know if for other people feels the same. I mean, if it felt the same, Milana and I wouldn't have that discussion, and we wouldn't raise it here today. So I would really would like to hear Tammie and Josepha about it, and also the girls coming from the Balkans.
So I also used to feel like groups that were specific for women or for non-binary or for people of color or whatever were harming the process more than they were helping the process of helping people to see that this group that we don't normally hear from is valuable. I used to really feel like it was not fair to the people that we were trying to get the attention from and like, pay attention to us, we're valuable. And I ran a women's only group that had a max % of men who could show up if they wanted to. 10% of men, as long as you're an ally, so that we had an opportunity to like identify what good allyship is and all of those things. I used to really feel like having a dedicated place was not bad, but certainly not helpful, essentially just neutral. But in my time with on the one hand, WordPress, because it's so much different than the other, so different from the other groups that I've ever worked with, but then also just having a lot more exposure to the way that these groups organize in all of their various formats, I really don't agree with that anymore. I think that you can't say only women are allowed here, only people of color are allowed here, and that is the solution, period. I think that there's something incredibly valuable about bringing together people who look like each other in a space where they maybe don't feel like they are welcome. Like, I don't necessarily feel like sexism or racism has overly impacted my life, because I can't remember a ton of like acute moments where someone was like, you're a woman and we will not listen to you. But that doesn't mean that it isn't happening. And that sort of discount of your value passively over time can lead you to also discount your own value. And so there's, my position on that has changed. I see now that as like part of an overall constellation of the way that we're helping people move forward into a shared space. I see the value of this sort of group now more than I ever used to before. And so, yeah, I think it's a tough question, but I have changed my position on that over the years. And Tammie?
I would +1. I've been on a very similar journey. I think also, like, I think it's natural. That kind of journey is probably natural for a lot of people. I think unless you maybe experience some key traumas, and I'm fortunate to have experienced that, I think the journey probably comes a little bit later to you. But I've learned through other people's stories the importance of spaces like this. And that's anyone that identifies as a woman. I think that that's really, really important. or non-binary. And I think the identified is really, really important for these spaces, to be kind of feeling that here. But I also think that there's a space for two options. I don't think it's like there's that kind of phrase of like, why not both? I think you have to have these safe spaces, and I think these are so important. This has felt very safe, and this has felt really, really special to be able to speak and come here on today of all days and all those kind of things. And I think that that's great. I think you can have those other conversations with these people as well. But I really think that it doesn't have to exclude. It can include in other ways. I'm rambling a bit, but I think it's a journey that everyone comes to. And you don't have to experience that trauma. You maybe have to, if you haven't experienced that trauma yourself, you maybe have to listen to some of the stories that people are telling you, because the stories are pretty loud in the world. And if you maybe hear those stories, or at least for me, hearing those stories changed a lot of my perspective.
And Tammie, that is one of the things that I think changed my perspective on that so aggressively, because I remember, like, it was at the end of one of my years. I was doing my planning for the next year of stuff in WordPress, right? And I came to this realization, having looked at all of those stories, that like the burden of proof about whether a woman is safe here, or a person of color is safe here, or a non-binary person is safe here shouldn't be on the shoulders of the person who's not sure whether they're safe or not, you know? Like, that's WordPress's job. That's my job to say, like, women are safe here, I believe. Here are all the things that I did to make it safe. And I think that groups like this are one of those things that help us to shoulder that burden of proof as WordPress, saying we understand that it's hard to be an underrepresented voice in this space. Here are some opportunities where it's, like you said, having a lobby, having the foyer to join in first, and make sure that you have some concept of like where you fit in the thing. But,
and if people are feeling uncomfortable for not being part of this, maybe they can remember that uncomfort. To be honest, that's not necessarily. I don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable. I really don't. I want everyone to be happy.
We're welcoming.
But do you know what? Like, if someone feels safe here who didn't feel safe before, and people who feel safe all the time feel a bit not included, then they're feeling, you know, that there's something here for a lesson and some learning, and it shouldn't be why this is set up. But I should not be included in some spaces that should be safe for other people. If that's not my privilege, right? And I would want that. So I would want those safe spaces for people. So I think there's something kind of there as well.
Any other lady would like to share her opinion about that, or something she had discussed previously, or something she heard about it when we announced the Women Only meetup?
Hi. I will try to say my opinion. My English are bad. I think more important than a women's only meetup is to have women as a role model. When I first started to contribute, it was very helpful for me to see other women contribute in a men's world, in a WordPress world. So I believe it will be valuable in these meetups to have people like Josepha and Tammie, which are contribute in WordPress and can show us how we can believe in ourselves and contribute. It is not only to have a safe place. I don't think that a big percent women's developers are feeling threatened, but we don't dare to come front. Να στο πω στα ελληνικά. Ευαγγελία.
Άμα, if you want, you can. Yes.
Ναι.
I can translate it.
Ναι. Νομίζω ότι είναι πιο σημαντικό να έχουμε γυναίκες σαν την Τάμι και τη Τζοζέφα που έχουν πετύχει στον κόσμο τον αντροκρατούμενο, ας πούμε, του WordPress και να προβάλλονται εδώ, όπως αντίστοιχα, και να συμμετέχουν και άντρες σε αυτά τα δικά μας τα meeting, γιατί δεν νομίζω να είναι τόσο θέμα ασφάλειας, δηλαδή δεν θα μας φάνε οι άνθρωποι όταν συμμετέχουμε σε ένα κανονικό meetup, και κυρίως να πιστούμε εμείς οι γυναίκες, βάζω και τον εαυτό μου μέσα, ότι μπορούμε να σταθούμε και να μιλήσουμε σε ένα κανονικό meetup, δηλαδή να πούμε τη γνώμη μας τεχνολογικά.
What Lena is saying about the meetups is that she doesn't think it is very important to consider the meetup as a safe space, because technically men are not trying to eat us. So they can attend also the meetups we do. But we need more women coming forward like Tammie and Josepha to show how we contribute, why we contribute, and setting an example as they have done it before. And by their actions, they can be an example for other girls to go forward and contribute. And also find a way to speak more, maybe training speakers or something like that for regular meetup.
Can I pick up, I'm not sure if you meant this, Josepha, but you said something about, and it kind of relates to the safe space. I'm not sure what context or how you said it, but you were saying that you didn't ever feel that you weren't safe or weren't aware. I think that's what you were
in my
turned.
Yeah, in my career in technology, like I have basically never felt like, you know, some man was going to come over and eat me, or and that's a high privilege of me, right? Like that, I'm really lucky.
Yeah, but I think something that I've realized, or in my own journey of self-awareness and my position in the world, is I've kind of accepted a lot of behaviors. And this is something that I think is really, really important to realize. And that's not like everyone's poop or everyone's not great or whatever, but I've accepted like a lot of behaviors and like paper cuts have built up over time, or I've built up resilience to things that I shouldn't have had to build up resilience to. And when I say safe space, I don't mean like being eaten necessarily or dramatic threatening. I mean, just a space, maybe you can just speak 1% more freely, or you can just maybe let your words come more comfortably, or maybe you can do that. And I say this is someone that I used to find all women groups way more challenging because I hadn't gone on that discovery of myself, and it's taken me a very long time to embrace my gender, embrace everything, and go on that discovery. I'm still going on it. It's a long journey. However, going through all of that, I realized that, you know what, I maybe accepted some things that I maybe wouldn't have accepted or shouldn't have accepted. So I think I'm not saying like look over your life and therapize yourself, but I think it's really, really important to think about sometimes actions are really small and they add up.
Yes.
Basically, I feel that I have never been in a position that made me feel very, very uncomfortable, or even a little bit. I didn't have to put up with some kind of behavior towards me or towards a colleague. However, I have heard stories that were not at least, not even a little bit nice. And I know that there are people, there are women out there, there are men also that had such experiences. The thing is that the percentage women had these experiences is far bigger. I will give you an example that happens right now in this meetup. Previously, I asked if someone has any question to ask, and it was very difficult for someone to raise their hand and ask a question. It's not that 20 people here tonight don't have any question, I believe. It's that they have learned somehow not to voice their questions, um, thinking that the question might be stupid, or the question might not be interesting for other people and someone might judge them. This comes from some place that wasn't really safe. So I would like to see a step, let's say, on a staircase that will make people feel they can voice their questions and raise their voice, and feel free to do that in a regular meetup, in a WordCamp, any place else, not only inside the community, but also considering their workplace, their way of life um, in a while.
At the same time, though, like, yes, I want everyone to feel as comfortable speaking wherever they exist as they do in places that are specifically built for them to exist. I want that. But also, like, that's a muscle you have to build. No one shows up in a space where there's not a lot of psychological safety, either because they don't know where that psychological safety comes from for them, or because no one has committed to that work in that space. Like, no one comes into those situations thinking to themselves, like, I gotta be careful, otherwise everyone's gonna be mean to me. Like, no one feels that way when they're starting, but there's also a hesitation. And I don't think that's necessarily specific to women or to men. In this particular moment, what we see for technology is overwhelmingly white men in the United States. And so essentially everybody else is a minority voice there. And I think it's important for, I mean, for me, because I am leading WordPress, but like anyone who is leading from any position in WordPress, I think it's important to essentially give people space to practice that. I don't know.
May I say something?
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupt.
No,
I just want to raise my voice because I'm very shy person and I don't like to speak. Right now I'm shaking, to be honest, but I want to practice my muscle. So I don't have nothing special to say. Just I'm new in this community and I'm learning WordPress for maybe 7 months, 6 months, and I will keep going because I like it. And I really want to say just something, nothing special, and to say thank you to everyone, and especially Evangela, I'm not sure for the real name, because I can see myself in her words. I recognize myself in every word. So just to introduce myself shortly and to say thank you to everyone, and I will start to talk finally, because I never loved that. Even on my faculty, I finished faculty of economics. I was never raising my hand or say anything, just I'm afraid. That's it.
You're doing great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for speaking and
Thank you
being
for your
shy.
support.
Being shy is fine. I'm shy too. I'm really shy. Do you like your boots? I like staring at my boots.
Maybe even I'm not so much shy as I said, just maybe I need that wall to break through. And after that time, I think I'm good.
Sometimes we say the word shy when we just mean we just like quiet.
Maybe, yes, maybe. Thank you.
That was, I think, the most touching thing tonight, at least for me. I'm very happy that we had this meeting, and I really think that we will keep it going as we have been discussing once per month for all the women in Balkans, and maybe later, why not having something bigger, as Milana said previously, because there are many of us. They're just not here now, but we can see them in a later time. An idea we had last night discussed with Milana about having men attendees or even speakers at a future meetup. Some of the organizers that have been very supportive of us, because at least my experience in Milana's, as far as I know, with the organizing teams of the meetups was not just good, it was like heaven, at least for me. I I have a family here consisting from 15 brothers. And now I have another 6, 7 sisters in the organizing team of Greece. And at first I was introduced in WordPress in the community by a man. And I've been asked to do things from people that didn't know me, but they respected me from day one. And they have given me the idea to get a step further, and they have pushed me to do things that got me out of my comfort zone. I mean, I was shy standing in front of a crowd, and I had to present one track of a WordCamp, and our local WordCamps are a bit big. I mean, usually there are over 500 people. So standing in front of people with a microphone saying, Tammie Lister is going to talk now for something, I don't know exactly, was for me a huge step. But when I was looking at my left and saw my little brothers, let's say, it made me feel more safe. They were my safe place in the community, and they still are, and they're very supportive. So I believe, yes, like Milana, that we could also have male speakers or attendees that are very supportive, and they can explain why they are supportive and how they are supportive, and maybe they have ideas to share about this.
Yeah, in Serbia, it's the same. You know, we are not just organizers from different cities, and we have like 5, 6, 7 cities in Serbia with meetups, but we are also really good friends, like really good friends. And if I need anything, I can ask any of them, and they would do things for me that my family wouldn't do for me. So it's difficult, you know, to, and it's not just with me, it's the community in Serbia is like that, and it's difficult to tell them, well, you know, uh, I know you are all good and kind and you will be good and kind, but you cannot attend this. And when I'm sure they can help others feel welcome just as they made me feel welcome.
Yeah, I think this is a very nice meetup for the future, since we are going to set the steps, the next steps in a few days. But I would really like to listen to some of the attendees today. If you would like to see something more specific, something in particular, we intend to have some speaker training sessions, some talks and inspiring women giving their sharing their experience with us in the WordPress world. Is there something that you would like to see, except for how to get involved, a contribute, or even a contributor or a translator day? We can make a poll of that so they can vote with a serenity in mind. Ladies, I can see you're a bit tired, so I have kept you here around 2 hours now that I see it,
Oh,
maybe a
there's
little
a
bit
suggestion.
more.
We could make a mentoring program. Thank you,
Yeah,
Anastasia. Yeah, we could.
That's a good one.
Mhm.
So I will probably give you a poll within the next days and maybe some notes about tonight, etc. And I'm very happy that I saw you all tonight, but I think it's about time to wrap up since we've been here for around 2 hours and it was very, very nice 2 hours, I think. I really hope to see you all next month. We will set a date. I think we had a date, but I don't recall it now for sure. It is the third Friday of the next month, but I'm not quite sure when the next Friday is. I think it's 15th of April. So we will have more news within the next days. And thank you all for coming today. And you're very welcome. And you really made me very, very happy. And since tomorrow it's my birthday, this was a very nice birthday present.
Happy early birthday!
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Evangelia.
You were the best birthday gift ever.
Well, thanks for letting us join. I just spoke on behalf of Tammie. That's not what I meant to do. Thank you for letting me join.
Thank you for letting me join too. You can speak for me. It was fine.
Josepha, you want me to mute Tammie?
Tammie?
You want me to mute
Never.
her so you can talk on her behalf?
Never. All right.
So,
Thank you so much
ladies,
for your time.
see you next month, ladies.
Bye.
Have a good
See you
night.
soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.